Score, the podcast. The only show taking you inside the studios of the world's most celebrated composers and musicians.
Coming to you from Santa Monica, this is Score, the podcast. We're inside Arata Studios. I'm your host, Kenny Holmes, alongside my co-host, Robert Kraft.
Arata Studios, it's a wonderful name for the room that Steve Jablonsky works in. He's our guest this week, and he told us that Arata is a Japanese word that means new and fresh. So we're going to be welcoming Steve in just a minute.
We're also joined every week by our executive producer, Matt Schrader.
Hey there, guys.
Hey.
Matt.
And as Robert mentioned, we're really excited about our guest today. He's the composer for many of Michael Bay, big director movies like the Transformers series, The Island, Pain and Gain. Also, he works a lot with Peter Berg. You know his music from Deepwater Horizon, Lone Survivor, Battleship. He also did Jordan Peele's Keanu, which I freaking love that movie. It's so funny. And also, there's a new Netflix movie that he scored called Game Over Man with the Workaholics crew.
Nice.
Which is, I haven't seen it yet, but I heard it's hilarious.
Should be great. Steve's
he's
a
also
huge
working
talent.
on a new blockbuster that comes out in July with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson called Skyscraper, which I just watched the trailer for.
July 13th.
Looks action-packed. He's award-winning composer Steve Jablonsky. Also in today's episode, we go behind the score with the Oscar-winning duo of Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Of course, Trent Reznor, the frontman for Nine Inch Nails.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also going to be playing Name That Score with Steve. And another chance for our listeners to win a prize. What's the topic today, Matt?
Sports movies. Sports.
Nice.
Some of the great classic sports movies. There's just some great ones on this list, and some he may be familiar with.
How cool. So many great sports movies. I'm trying to think some of my faves. Hope you'll get to them.
All right. Well, I do want to move on to Matt and I went and saw Ready Player One.
Nice.
Together. And with a group. It wasn't a date so much. But
Okay.
We watched it in the Dolby Cinema, which, I mean, if you're going to watch a movie with the sound effects and the score like that movie,
more and more of those popping up that are just
it's
the best experience to watch a movie. The laser projection and
and it's not just the audio, but like when they show you the regular black versus real black, and they're like, don't worry, the projector's still on. It looks like you're in an empty dark room, but it's still on.
Right, the contrast just is crazy.
It's crazy,
but it's
crazy.
such a great room to watch a movie.
I don't know if it's a good sign that you're talking more about the room than the movie.
Well,
the movie was good too.
The movie was visually and sonically stunning. It was just, it was like being on a ride. It was hard to explain. Like it was almost like it felt like you put the VR helmet on and you were in that world. I kind of left feeling like I did after watching Avatar in 3D for the first time, where it was like, regular world's kind of boring.
Right. Something groundbreaking in all of this stuff. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of CGI and a lot of, really, really groundbreaking stuff. A lot of movement. I can't believe it must have taken them forever. Just the graphics on that stuff.
And how was Mr. Silvestri's score?
It was great.
It's great. Yeah, two-time Oscar nominee Alan Silvestri did the score, and I believe this is only the second time Spielberg has strayed away.
Yeah, The Color Purple with Quincy Jones was the first one that I think he did without John Williams.
Right, and then Bridge of Spies with Thomas Newman.
Right, I forgot about that a couple years ago.
Yeah, so Spielberg, of course, I think he always wants to have John Williams, but they were doing the post, and there just wasn't time. So what happened was Spielberg gave Silvestri the movie and said, "Hey, I'm wrapping up the post with Williams, and we'll get to this in a bit, but go ahead and get started." The movie has so many Easter eggs in it of little hints at different nostalgic moments, including Back to the Future, which Silvestri scored.
Yep.
So he had a little bit of his own flavor already connected to the movie, which is pretty cool. And actually, I read an article that said when they first sat down and Spielberg saw the first cue that they performed with an orchestra, he stood up and yelled, "Sold!" And Silvestri,
God.
I mean, Silvestri, who's a pro and a legend, I imagine he still had some nerves working with Spielberg for the first time, and to hear "Sold" is probably a pretty cool moment. And I think they hugged it out after that. So.
Wow, how great.
And it's interesting to point out, too, that Silvestri's also scoring Avengers.
Yeah, Infinity War, which comes out this weekend.
Right. And it's kind of another example of taking multiple elements of, with all the different Avenger themes that have been done by different composers and wrapping them into one score. That seems like it would be a difficult process to kind of keep it original, but also make it your own. And
well, Alan is one of those towering talents. And we've done a number of pictures together, and he's the guy that when you're in a pinch, you want to turn to Alan and say, can you either figure out what they were saying that they didn't like, or can you figure out how to solve this problem that no one seems to be able to solve? He's the guy you want in that situation, because he says, wait right there, and he comes back the next day and has always knocked it out. He's really tremendous.
Also, composer Ennio Morricone, he announced that he's doing his final live concert, and it'll be in London on November 26th. It's crazy to think, though, that he's 88 years old, and I was looking at the concert schedule. He's doing, like, I think 12 or something concerts just in the month of June at 88 years old. I mean, and they're not just in one building. He's going all over Europe. That's got to be so taxing to still do it. But I was reading this article, and he's quoted as saying, "I really like conducting my music in concerts because I'm convinced it's not just for films; it has its own life." So he feels that it doesn't need to be married with the film, and I think that's more and more what we're seeing with live concerts.
And I actually had the experience of exactly what you just described, which is hearing Ennio Morricone music live without the picture, and it was because of an accident. An actual mistake that I had made in Rome. I went to work with Ennio. Very, very lucky to go work with Ennio when Warren Beatty was working on and directing the movie Bulworth. And so Bulworth is almost all hip hop music, and songs. But Beatty had 9 minutes of score that he wanted, and he was insistent that the only person that could do it was Ennio Morricone. And the only way that Ennio Morricone would do those 9 minutes was in his studio at what's called the Forum in Rome. And unfortunately, as the head of music, I had to accompany Warren Beatty to Rome to make sure that everything went okay. I thought I had it all knocked out, and I was going to get there at 10 o'clock and but I left the hotel late, and the cab driver didn't understand what I was saying, and we went to the wrong neighborhood. I get to the Forum Studios at about 10:20. Forum Studios is an odd building, and it wasn't clear where the front door was, or I was so distracted I didn't know. So I pull on one door, it's locked. I pull on a second door. I pull on a third door around back, and it's open. I figure that's the front door of Forum Studios.
Must be.
Of course, I open the door. I'm in a little hallway. I'm not sure where to go. I open another door, and I've just walked into the room where Ennio Morricone is recording. And it's a live recording session with the red lights on, and I've just kind of pulled open a door a little out of breath, and I've walked onto the stage. There's a good news and bad news to this. The bad news is probably somewhere on a cue in Bulworth is the sound of a door opening and a little bit of an out-of-breath music executive. The good news is I actually walked in, and I had the sensation, I kid you not, that I'd walked into heaven for one reason. I walked in, and the music was angelic. It was so beautiful at that moment in the room. It was like some scene out of, I just stepped in onto a cloud or something. Here was Ennio Morricone with full orchestra. And they were playing a cue that was so rhapsodic and so beautiful, and it was so weird that I was in the room with them. I wasn't hearing it through speakers in a control room. I wasn't hearing it on the score album. I was in the room while they were recording this cue. That's my Ennio Morricone moment, and I'm sticking to it.
Oh, that's so interesting.
It was so nice.
It's like a beam of light comes down as you're walking in.
I can't describe what it was like to walk in there and hear this kind of, it's like, it's The Simpsons. It was like this kind of beautiful. Yeah.
Did it ease your nerves after you walk? Oh, crap, I walked in, and then it's like...
Yeah. I not only wasn't nervous, I tried to blend in and make it clear that I was supposed to be there, and I sort of hung out for the next few cues right in that space and didn't make myself known.
It's a power move. You step in, you just stand there like you were meant to walk in.
I think that's what you always do, you know. Do you know who I am? I'm supposed to be here. And I just stood there.
All right. Well, plenty to come on Score the Podcast. Coming up after the break, Steve Jablonsky is going to join us. We're right here in his studio, and we're going to talk about scoring blockbusters, his big work with Michael Bay and Transformers, and also coming up through the ranks with Hans Zimmer just around the corner at Remote Control Productions.
Who he idolized growing up.
Oh, yeah. Big time. And he actually, I think he had a similar story that Ramin Djawadi did about kind of coming on the scene randomly and sneaking his way in there. But we'll get to that. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, Matt Schrader here. We're back to the show in 15 seconds, but a quick thank you to everyone who's been telling a friend about Score the Podcast. We're one of the fastest growing entertainment podcasts out there right now, and that's thanks to you telling a friend. You're probably thinking of somebody else right now that enjoy the show. If it's safe to do so, hit pause and let them know about Score the Podcast. It helps keep this show going. Now back to the show.
Hey, welcome back to Score the Podcast. We're having some fun today, Kenny and I, and we have an amazing guest with us.
Yes, excited about this one.
Really great. We're actually welcoming Steve Jablonsky to his own studio because we're sitting in his wonderful room.
Welcome.
Here.
Is that why this looks
Thanks
so
for
familiar?
being here in your own place.
That's why it looks familiar. Exactly right.
Oh, thank you
Such
guys
a
for
cool
coming to my
studio.
place.
It's like a French castle. The restrooms even say Monsieur. And
I wish I could take credit, but it was like that when I got here.
Can you
so.
tell us, what was it before?
It was a studio.
Oh, wow.
I revamped the mix room that's to my right here, but other than that, it was kind of the same, and I liked it enough that I left most of it alone.
I like that. How did
Yeah.
you find it, just out of curiosity?
I was, at the time, had my studio at Hans Zimmer's place,
Yeah.
which is about 5 blocks from here.
Yeah.
And I'd kind of been casually looking for my own place because Hans's place is great, but it gets a little crazy, you know.
Yeah.
And I think I was on a project and I was wanting to use his mix room, but there were 10 other composers who needed it. And I'm like, I wonder if there's any other spaces around the area because I love the area,
Yeah.
Santa Monica. And this place just went kind of live on real estate listings
Nice.
Oh,
right
wow.
when I was looking.
Perfect.
And I came over and I said, wow, this is pretty sweet and it's the right place. And just that was it.
Was there, when you came back after you took a look, was there like a lump in your throat and an emotional moment with Hans?
Yeah, I did feel like it happened so quickly. Like, oh God, how do I approach this? You know, do I go tell Hans? I actually went to his business partner first and said, I found this place and I think I'm going to move out. And I do still feel like maybe they would like me to have not done that. But we're still friends, and because now all of my projects happen here as opposed to there. I would love to still be there, but I do like having my own.
it's like moving out of the
space
house.
Yeah.
I'm moving out.
Yeah,
Going to
that's
college.
the perfect place, perfect way to put it, because I learned, just like you learn from your parents, I learned everything from Zimmer and Harry Gregson Williams, who I worked with a lot, and all the guys there. It's an environment where you see amazing things hourly.
We're gonna get into your
Okay,
work
good,
with
good.
Yes.
Hans and Harry. Of course, Steve Jablonsky. You know him from the Michael Bay movies, Transformers, The Island, Pain and Gain. Also Peter Berg's movies, Deepwater Horizon, Lone Survivor, Battleship. A lot of Mark Wahlberg flicks.
There was a period of my life where I think I joked to most of my friends that I see Mark Wahlberg more than I see my wife and my kids.
That's
and
amazing.
Anyone I
The
know.
weird thing is he was saying the same thing about you.
Also, you have a new summer blockbuster coming out starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson called Skyscraper, which the trailer's up, looks pretty awesome.
Yeah. No, it's
July
great. He's-
13th.
July 13th, yeah. So.
Now it must be, for you, doing blockbusters. This is like your gig, doing blockbusters. But there must have been a moment where you got the job Transformers. And I remember that, hearing that you had gotten Transformers. It wasn't a Fox picture, but what a huge, incredible compliment that was to you. I don't know exactly how you got what the
not
process
sure either.
was. Well, somebody heard your music. I'm sure Michael Bay heard it and said, this is really the right tone. But can you just tell us, I'm sure you've told the story before, but would you mind sharing with our listeners a little bit about how you got the gig and also what it was like to know that you had just inherited an enormous picture.
Right. I can actually tell you how I got it. It's the same story for a lot of guys like me in this or any business where people help you, right? So I had written a good amount of music for Hans on Pearl Harbor, which Michael Bay didn't necessarily know what I was doing. He saw me around. Hans doesn't hide the fact that I'm helping or whoever is helping.
Yeah.
And he saw me around, but I don't think he knew or particularly cared. He just wanted a good score.
Sure.
And I had done quite a bit for that one. And it was right around the time that Michael was starting his production company, Platinum Dunes. Their first film was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the remake. But the original was one of my favorites. I don't know what that says about me, but I'm a horror fan. And they were looking for a composer to do their first film, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And Bob Badamy is one of the biggest music supervisors. And there's another gentleman, Pat Sanston, who was a post-production supervisor for Michael Bay. That's a big job, post-production. So we're just overseeing basically everything, music, sound effects, visual effects. These guys who had Michael Bay's ear, and I think Hans got in there as well, they all said, why don't you give this guy, Jablonsky, a chance? Yeah. They said he did a lot on Pearl Harbor, and I'd worked on Armageddon as well.
Nice.
My whole thing with Michael started from those guys saying, why don't you give Steve a chance?
Wow.
And Michael said, okay. And I think I did it for, a couple dollars and was terrified the whole time. But at the end, I remember at the final playback of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, we were all there, Michael and everybody, and Michael said to me, boy, you did an amazing job, and we didn't pay you anything.
Wow.
And everybody laughed, and that was sort of the start, I think. I look at that as the start of my relationship with Michael. He really liked what I did for that film.
When you come into Transformers, you've done other movies, you've done other jobs, but this one, the brand, the Transformers, the build-up, is there a lot of extra pressure on you to make sure that, how were you just circling back with the theme? You got to get this right. You can't mess this one up.
Yeah. Sorry, I drifted away from Transformers. I was giving you
great
the original.
Tale.
No.
I like that.
Yeah. So Transformers came all out of that, and my younger brother was obsessed with it. I, of course, was well aware of what Transformers were, and thinking back, maybe I was just numb to everything that was going on, but I really tried not to obsess over what it was that I was about to do. Just sit down and write some music, and my general motto is if I kind of feel it, then it's ready to play to other people.
Was there a day that can you remember driving away from a meeting kind of high-fiving yourself like, wow, I got the gig.
I got the part.
I just nailed that scene.
Well, I do remember writing, after I scored the scene that I think you just played.
Ding,
as
Arrival to Earth.
Arrival to Earth. I did that scene that week, or not too long after I did that scene. Michael had Steven, quote Steven, Spielberg, the only Steven.
Right. You just had to say Steven.
Yes, that's all. And
Steven Seagal.
Steven Seagal came over to hear the cue. Spielberg came over to the screening room, and it was just Michael. I wasn't there, but just Steven and Michael. And Michael called me later and said, yeah, it's Steven over. He said he really thought that cue was great, and he loved the majesty you gave the Transformers. And that was a moment where I didn't know he was meeting with Spielberg. I didn't know anything was going on. All he said was Steven said, and I knew exactly what he was talking about, and that was a high five.
And what a wonderful word, the majesty.
Yeah, that was the nobility, and he liked that we gave them that feel as they arrived to Earth.
You actually feel that in the cue that's in Score the movie, where you demonstrate the mix of the French horns.
Right.
That is majestic. Even the use of French horns is kind of royal in a way.
Yeah, and that was the idea to give, not just be these cartoony things or make them sort of
like
give
a
them some
god
humanity
or something.
Yeah, without going overboard. But
It must have been exciting just to see the movie blow up and have you suddenly be the new hot guy. Suddenly, your name was on everybody's lips. You were the guy.
I am. This is the room where I spend all my hours, and I shelter myself from all that stuff, and I try not to think too much about
It's smart, because when we pulled up today, the paparazzi outside was just, it was intense to get through them.
Those tour buses drive through Santa Monica, and I always joke with my wife, I'm like, oh my God, let me just duck my head. They're going to try to take my picture.
It's great. Yeah, I see them.
I've been recognized maybe
I wave at them
5 times in my life.
When you work on, for example, Transformers, there's a lot of CGI when you work on Michael Bay movies. Oftentimes the movie's not done, and you don't really have the visuals to score. How difficult is that? You really have to get creative, I imagine, with what you're writing, because you don't know what you're seeing.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, it's even to this day, the film I'm doing now, Skyscraper, a lot of the Skyscraper wasn't there, the fire wasn't there. But Transformers in particular, because half the cast is CGI, the way they film it is there are people running around with poles that are 50 feet tall with, Optimus Prime's face at the top.
Nice.
There's just a cardboard cutout of his face.
Kind of goofy looking.
Just looks
It's
like a
very
sign
goofy
with
looking.
a sign with the face at the top.
Strictly
A
to
robotic
give
face.
the actors an eye line to where they're supposed to be looking.
Right.
And they're running around and where Optimus would be running. So that's usually what I see first. Well, that's always what I see first on those films. The visual effects don't come in until pretty much the last minute, usually. I don't know why that is. I know they take a long time to render. And
How late in the process is it? Do you have time to make adjustments still? Or is it just little tweaks here and there by that
Because there's
point,
probably
it's-
sound effects that come in and stuff too that might drown out some of your music, or vice versa.
this is where you rely heavily on your music editors, because at some point you have to say, okay, I need to record the orchestra now, or we're going to run out of time. We're not going to have time to record the orchestra and mix it all. So there's a point where you decide this is the version of the film we're going to score with the orchestra. Anything after that will have to be edited, or maybe I can fix it with some samples, some orchestral samples, which we really try not to do. But generally, we've been able to
Have you
sort things
ever?
out.
I've been on a couple pictures like that where the composer overscored because it was an animatic, or which is for those of you, it's a drawing.
Yeah.
They're not actually scoring the scene until they get the effects in.
So
And
it's a series of concept
saying,
art.
basically.
this will be replaced by, in this case, apes in Planet of the Apes. But until that time, you're going to look at pictures. You're going to look at guys, Andy Serkis with green dots on his face, looking at you as. So I've been on pictures where the composer overscored when the effects came in. He went, oh my God, it's melodramatic when it could be so much subtler in the music.
Right.
Did you ever overscore a guy with a pole and an Optimus Prime and find out it doesn't need all that when you see the actual
That's a good
Transformer?
point. I can see how that would happen if you have an Andy Serkis, if you're scoring an actor actually giving you a performance.
Yes.
I don't think that ever happened because I was always I always kind of knew the vibe. Michael's pretty clear in his direction usually, and I kind of knew the vibe that we were going for. The animatics, as you'd say, they give you a very good sense of the timings are always different. So that's the pain in the butt.
Do you think they ever create based on what you wrote? Because they're creating constantly, and you're writing, seeing nothing.
Yeah.
So they may get your score before they've created anything.
Yeah, that has happened. It'd be nice if it happened more, but I think often it's just they do what they want to do visually, what they feel is right, and then we will adjust. Like a good example is the whole in Age of Extinction, when the Dinobots sort of come over the hill down into the valley and save the day, basically. And there's this big dramatic cue. Michael wanted me to score that early on, just because he wanted to know how it was going to sound, and there was nothing other than it was panning shots of a mountain, and occasionally things would blow up, which meant something got stepped on or something got thrown, and that was a tough one because I scored it, and some visuals came in. We did it again. Some more visuals came in. The timings of everything just kept changing.
So difficult.
And it was a constant catch up to, and I hope what's in the movie is not just an edited mess. I have to look at it again because I always
That
feel
makes me
like,
what's it like being in the room with Michael Bay, who's known for lots of action, lots of explosions, lots of, layers of movement all happening at the same time. But when you get something like that, it's not there yet. Does he say, well, it's going to come in from the left, it's going to whoosh? Like, is he creating lots of sound effects as you're in these kind of spotting meetings, figuring out
he doesn't
where
do the sound effects thing, but he does. The interesting thing about Michael is that every frame is in his head, and often that's the only place it is. So I don't know, and his editors, we're all trying to get it out of his head, and he will, of course, tell us some things, but ultimately he's just such a visionary guy. And that same cue, when I scored it, he got a little heated at one part of the scene and said, "What? Why aren't you scoring what you're seeing?" was the quote, and I just I had to keep in the laughter. And I said, "What am I seeing? Can you tell me what I'm seeing, because I don't see anything." And but to him, it's there, and I understand that.
He actually could visualize exactly everything and thought everyone in the room saw it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's exactly what was going on in his head. It was playing properly, and so it was just me trying to decipher all of these things all of these clues he was giving me.
Yeah.
All right, coming up after the break, we're going to talk to Steve about his first days working with Hans and Harry, even the first cue, which even has your name on it.
The Jablonsky Variations.
The Jablonsky Variations. And we're also going to find out what's different about scoring fact versus fiction. But first, behind the score.
Behind the score, the inside stories from Hollywood's greatest filmmakers and composers.
Composers have experimented for years with the blending of synths and the orchestra. When director David Fincher came on to direct The Social Network, he knew it needed a radically different sound than his previous film, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, scored by Alexandre Desplat. Fincher took a shot in the dark, reaching out to a rock star, Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails.
When David Fincher calling, "Hey, I want you to score my next film." Fuck yeah. It's a movie about Facebook. I'd be hard-pressed to think of something that sounded less sexy. Possible rom-com might have done that. But, and then you read the script and you realize it is actually a very compelling story.
Reznor had never scored a film, but a friend from the record business, Atticus Ross, had some ideas.
To me, I think that the music, it should be native.
Rather than try to crash course to see how legitimate people do it, we went with our instinct of saying, what if we take the skills we know?
Those skills have rocked the charts as the edgy electronic rock band Nine Inch Nails. With hit songs like The Hand That Feeds, Only, and Survivalism. All reaching #1 on the U.S. alternative rock charts. The style represented a possible new direction for film music.
And we've read these words on paper with a bit of fear, like how are we going to support that? We've seen this scene that feels sterile because there's nothing supporting it, but there's action happening, and you realize this power we wield in terms of how much we can shape it by trying new things and watching how radically different that scene plays out. So we looked for clues from David as to what he was looking for. Did you want something kind of orchestral? Did you want something that just disappears into the background? Are you looking for the Star Wars theme to somehow fit its way into that? And what we were able to extract from him was, I wanted to feel kind of electronic. I wanted to have its own personality.
The sound they eventually unlocked was unique. Fincher suggested they use it over the opening credits to set the mood.
And in that important area at the very beginning, when you're not sure what this film is, you just went through rapid-fire argument, Aaron Sorkin dialogue, into this kind of weird, unsettling, kind of sad, not triumphant tone. The whole movie feels different after that.
There's an incredible depth. That character, the loneliness, it's certainly a three-dimensional piece.
The Academy recognized their breakthrough with an Oscar for Best Original Score.
I think my only real skill is being able to be honest and convey a kind of honest emotional connection to my work. I've screwed my career in Nine Inch Nails up because there's been lengthy periods of time where I haven't put records out. I don't feel like I have anything to say, and in the process, we were encouraged to go further than we kind of conservatively started approaching it initially.
Reznor and Ross have continued to work together. They scored Fincher's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and Gone Girl, Peter Berg's Patriots Day, and last year's award-winning Ken Burns docuseries, The Vietnam War.
For more stories behind the score, read Score, The Interviews, based on the international hit film Score, a film music documentary featuring raw insight from Hans Zimmer, James Cameron, Quincy Jones, Randy Newman, Trent Reznor, and many more. Score, The Interviews, available now at score-movie.com.
Hey, we're back with Steve Jablonsky. What a fantastic start to this interview. I learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I just think it's wonderful to hear your perspective on some of these great movies you've worked on. And it's really a privilege for us to be with you and hear it.
It's an honor to be here.
One of the first cues you worked on with Hans had your name in the title. Can you?
Right.
It was called the Jablonsky Variations from Tears of the Sun. Can you talk about why it's called the Jablonsky Variations
Sure.
and what the story is with that?
Yeah, that was actually the third or fourth film I worked on with Hans. And when we started that one, he said to me something like, let's just have some fun and write some good music, which I thought was a pretty cool sort of pep talk. That was all it was as we were going
This
into
was
this
Tears
film.
of the Sun,
Tears
you
of the
said
Sun, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we were both writing in his room, which is now, I think it's now Ramin's room is where he worked.
In the corner?
Oh,
in the
cool.
corner.
Yeah,
that was it. I remember that room.
Yeah. But that was originally Hans's room,
Mm-hmm.
and he would write during the day, and I would come in, whatever, dinner time or after, and write overnight. And then he would I would see him in the morning and play him what I'd done, and then go sleep for a few hours.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a little rough, but again, it was writing that sort of closely. Even though I wasn't right next to Hans, I was sort of pretty close to Hans while I was writing, and so we were just having fun, trying to have fun, write good music, as he said. And I wrote that piece over. Oh, there it is. I think it was this piece that brought on this comment where he came in the next morning and I played it to him what I had done. And he said, "Oh, okay, I see how it is. So we're actually writing really good music now. Okay, so I'm going to step up my game." And it was something like that. And to have Hans Zimmer tell you that was pretty cool. But
That's got to be one of those days where you drive home or whatever. You're thinking, "Whoa!"
I just wanted to
huge.
go to bed, but after writing all night, the night shift is rough. But yeah, no, that was pretty cool. And the naming of the track on the soundtrack was all him.
Huh. It's his
that's-
sense of humor too.
It is his sense of humor, and just him going, this guy really busted his butt on this film, and I can't think of any of the other composer that would take a track on a soundtrack that says music by Hans Zimmer and call it, put the name of the guy who was helping him into the track title
That's
and
pretty
throw it
awesome.
on the CD. That was just because I had worked so hard on that piece. And he appreciated it.
That's so nice, and to see your name.
Did you know it was going to be on there, or did it come out and you're like, oh?
I think he told me. He said, well, you should call this something like the Jablonsky Variations. Something classical.
Very
and
important.
It does, and I laughed. I don't know that I was aware that he was actually
Hans,
going to do it.
We could actually do an entire podcast episode on the naming of cues.
Oh, yeah.
Because the most obvious choices are a line of dialogue in the scene. Somebody will say,
Yeah.
don't ever come back. That's the name of the cue. But
ever.
there's been a lot of
You're right.
ridiculous names that, of course, I'm sure you've used, and
Yeah.
people just decide. And I think the most serious and epic name I've heard is the Jablonsky variations.
Well, I'm an honor. That's honored.
It sounds pretty serious.
Sounds like a great movie, even. Yeah.
I worked on King Arthur with Hans as well, and that has some pretty epic track names.
Yeah.
Some humorous ones if you feel like going.
Is there
and
some
checking those
inside
out.
jokes in some of those?
Yeah, it was just a play on words of that sort of
Oh, that's
language,
nice.
and
Yeah.
so just check it
Ye
out.
old Jablonsky variations.
Yeah, that's what it'll be. I know you worked with Peter Berg. Strangely enough, I actually had the experience of working with Peter Berg on a couple things and was always surprised that he was musical.
Yeah.
And there's a scene in a movie I worked on where he played guitar in the movie on screen.
Peter
Really?
Berg
Yeah.
did.
Peter Berg
I did not know that.
It's called The Great White Hype.
Oh, yeah.
Directed by Reggie Hudlin.
Right.
I
And
remember
he's
that.
an actor in it, and he sits on the end of a funky little bed and makes up a song as a rock star, and it's very good.
Really?
I always liked it. Yep.
I didn't know that.
He probably keeps that hid.
He's never mentioned it to me.
But the pictures you do with Peter Berg are pretty different than the pictures you do with Michael Bay, and I wonder if you can speak about both the difference and also the fact that the Peter Berg stories often are more about real stories
Right.
as opposed to fictional. Does that influence your writing style?
Oh, huge. Oh, yeah, it's a huge influence. And I do love doing that kind of thing because it's a totally different approach. Like I think the first one we did was Lone Survivor,
Oh, great.
Yeah.
where it was a fact-based
Yeah.
script as opposed. Well, the first film we did together was Battleship, which was not fact-based. If you didn't know already, and then Lone Survivor. But so when I'm writing for a film like Lone Survivor, I'm constantly in my head imagining the wives of these men who died are going to sit in that theater and watch this film, and God forbid I make some kind of Hollywoodized version of their husband's life and death, and
Wow.
that's
yeah.
the last thing I want to do. So I always take sort of a subdued approach, like everything, even heroic moments on screen need to have a little bit of, we know these guys died, so we don't want to Hollywoodize this, if that's a word.
Yeah.
So, and the same with Deepwater Horizon, a lot of people died. 13 people, I think, died on that, on
Yeah.
the rig. And it's the same thing. Both of those scores have no orchestra other than maybe a solo string here and there. But
We have a cue, Taming the Dinosaurs.
This is from very early in the film still.
yeah, this is as they're driving to the rig.
No orchestra, though, here.
No, it's all electronics. Pete, he's very into. He used the band Explosions in this guy a lot for his early films, and they have a similar kind of
Yeah.
emotion, but not. It feels heroic, but at the same time, it's almost sad. And they're great at that kind of juxtaposition of.
That's a really beautiful way of saying it. It's heroic, but there's a little. It's not melancholy, but
Right.
it's a bittersweet feeling.
Yeah,
you
right.
get. And it's so interesting that what audience would know that you're writing with sensitivity to family members? It's really an interesting way to inform your writing.
Mm-hmm.
You said earlier that you started off wanting to be an engineer.
Right.
And the world of film music and creating has really come into the laptop and
Oh, yeah.
computer era. Do you think that prepared you more for that as
Yeah.
opposed to like the classical orchestral style?
Definitely. In college, I did take music classes. There were no film scoring or electronic music classes, but they were more traditional. But my mother had very kindly purchased a keyboard for me that had a little sequencer built in, so you could
Nice.
program. And what I would do was program in all of the parts for John Williams' scores. I did the Raiders of the Lost Ark suite, with all the changes, the beautiful suites that he does with the love theme comes in and then back to the hero, the Indiana Jones theme. I programmed in the trumpets and just by ear listening, because that's what I guess nerdy composers do, like myself. But I think doing that, and I would do Zimmer pieces as well. And I think unknowingly I learned a lot from just doing that, and also learned about how sequencers work. A sequencer is a program that I use and most composers use, where you program in the trumpet line and the string line, and it's,
I want to know.
It's how you write a lot of times now.
Yeah.
As a tech question and a little nerdy question, what was the keyboard and how many tracks did it have as a sequencer in what era? Because I'm thinking that Casio keyboard I had, I think you had 2 tracks,
Yeah.
a rhythm track and a little flute sound. So
I think it had it was a Yamaha SY77, I think is what it was. I still have it somewhere. And it had a floppy disk drive where you could save these.
Oh, wow.
And I think it had 16 tracks.
Oh.
I'm not entirely sure.
and a whole sound library that you could use.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and coming up, we're going to play
thought I was
Name
gonna win.
That Score.
Pressure is on.
I hope you're ready for this, Steve.
God.
Stick around. We will be right back.
Hey, Matt Schrader here, director of Score, a film music documentary. For the latest news from the film music world, follow us on Facebook. Just search Score, a film music documentary. Or let us know who you want to hear next on the show on Twitter, @ScoreThePodcast.
We're back here in Arata Studios with our guest this week, Steve Jablonsky. And Steve, I hope you're ready.
I'm not.
You're going to be introduced to the game that's sweeping social media. Don't forget to use that hashtag,
It's
Name
not
That Score.
strip poker, is it? Oh.
It's time. Hit it, Matt.
Get ready to play Name That Score! The film music game where a perfect score means you, yes you, could be a winner. Now let's play Name That Score!
Wow.
You can see how seriously we take the
Did
game.
you bring Henry
This is,
Mancini
that's
back
so
from the
nice.
grave to write that?
That
was
is
very
so
nice.
nice.
That's
Yep.
right. Again, it's very tasteful. I don't know what you guys are talking about. So here's the way this game plays. Name That Score. We play 5 famous film scores, but in reverse. These have all been flipped. So you'll choose from 3 multiple choice answers. The 5th and final question is worth double points. If anyone sweeps the table, gets all of these, we give away a prize to our listeners. And because the best scores have a theme, so does today's game. And the theme today is sports movies.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Batter up.
Mm-hmm.
So
Backwards sports movies.
some of these you'll
Backwards sports
recognize.
movies.
They get progressively difficult as we go along.
So I
here.
have to get all of them right, and then someone will win?
Or somebody does. Yeah,
Or
somebody.
somebody.
Does.
Oh,
If
we're
any
all
of us
playing.
get them right, then we
Oh,
give away a
good.
prize.
I have
That's
a
just me.
very tried and true technique. I listen to what the composer says.
Okay.
'cause they're almost always right, and then
God.
I agree.
So Robert always gets the first or second, and then we make him go last.
Oh,
after that.
God.
Okay.
So here we go.
Not all
Question 1. Is this the music from A League of Their Own by Hans Zimmer, Chariots of Fire, or Moneyball by Michael Dana? Did you work on Moneyball?
I didn't,
Okay.
but I liked it.
Here we go. Question 1.
Robert's
Well,
raising
I
his
mean-
hand.
Robert knows.
And he did it in slow motion, too.
I am going to say with great certitude that it is Vangelis,
Yeah.
Chariots of Fuego.
Everybody says,
Chariots. Yep.
oh, look, it sounds almost the same when you play it the other way around.
That's the magic.
All right, so points for everybody on that.
I
Vangelis or
remember
Vangelis?
in the playground running around in fake slow motion to that song. I think everyone probably has that story.
At one
Okay,
point or
we'll,
another.
we'll talk about this later. I think that it's something I'm not sure you want to share with the audience.
Oh, they want to know.
Question 2.
I was
Is
by
this
myself, too.
the music from Jerry Maguire, Rocky, or Caddyshack?
I think it's important. Do we know the composers of each
yeah,
one? 'Cause
Nancy Wilson for Jerry Maguire, Rocky, Bill Conti, or Caddyshack, Johnny Mandel.
Good to know. Here we go.
Steve's nodding his head.
I mean, huge influence on me as a kid. Should I say?
Yeah,
Go
you go
for it.
Bill Conti, Rocky.
All right. Everybody?
I am so certain that Steve is correct because of the way his body language the minute he heard it.
What
I'm
set
going.
it off? What set it off for you?
I just know that theme. You could play it backwards,
Yeah.
and I'll know it.
The texture is
Yeah,
pretty...
the sound, the 70s brass.
I'm trying to get a sense of what the composers are listening for versus us just being like, oh, that's a song. You probably hear certain instruments stand out. That one's
That-
a little more obvious, though.
The
So the
brass
first
of
two-
that score has a very specific from that era
It's even
sound.
a register. It's
Yeah,
a register the brass playing. That's
it's
sort
so
of
good.
Yeah.
Points for everybody on that one.
Right
So
on.
everyone is perfect so far. The questions are getting a little tougher here. So question 3.
It's like HQ.
Is this The Natural by Randy Newman, Seabiscuit, also by Randy Newman, or Space Jam by James Newton Howard, who's just the next building over? Robert thinks he knows.
I'm going
Steve,
with
too.
the final cue in The Natural, where the
nice.
ball goes over the fence and it knocks the lights out.
Yeah,
I'm
that's The Natural.
I'm going to go with Robert's choice on that. Although it kind of reminded me of The Sandlot a little bit, just hearing it.
That's the junior version of The Natural, actually, narratively.
And Steve?
Yeah.
The Natural?
Randy Newman, another hero of mine, yes.
It is from The Natural. It's a great score.
Oh my
Great
God.
score, a real breakthrough for Randy Newman.
Did they use that in The Sandlot?
I think they've used it in other films for sure.
Yeah. they've
I
used
wonder
it.
if it's in The Sandlot, because that
That's funny.
immediately set a trigger for me on.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
possible.
it's good.
All right, so 3 for 3, everybody. We got 2 questions
I like
left.
The correct
There is a bonus question which we may get to if we're still tied up at the end. But we'll move on to question 4. Is this from Remember the Titans, Trevor Rabin, Hoosiers, Jerry Goldsmith, or Cool Runnings by Hans Zimmer? Did you work on Cool Runnings?
I did not.
You did not. All
That was
right.
before my time. I have
Remember
an
the
answer.
Titans, Hoosiers, Cool Runnings.
I'm going to go with Remember the Titans.
That's my guess, Trevor.
I'm feeling strongly that to go in any other direction would be a mistake. I'm going to Remember the Titans.
It is Remember the Titans.
I always think of Trevor Rabin's story in the documentary score.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's right. You've heard this a
He
million times.
He didn't ask, which I wasn't particularly
right.
happy about.
At the Obama Victory
Right.
Night speech.
Yeah.
Right? You played that.
Trevor's such a good guy.
Yep.
All right,
Great
so
guy.
4 for 4. So we might have a bonus question. This last question's worth double. Doesn't matter for us because we're all tied up. So if one of you gets this one wrong, then
We got to stick together here so someone wins a prize, though.
Yes.
Don't go rogue, Robert.
Here we go. Question 5. Is this Radio by James Horner, Rudy, Jerry Goldsmith, or Miracle by Mark Isham? Steve's nodding his head.
Rudy.
Is it? Yeah. Sean Astin?
Yep.
I'm feeling strongly that Steve is correct.
Look at that
I don't-
move Robert did. He gave
Yeah.
a little point with the pen.
Yeah.
What is it? What do you think, Steve?
What do you think? Are you Rudyizing?
If you were on Jeopardy, you'd just be like peeking over at the screen. What are you writing?
Potpourri for 200.
Steve was so confident.
Radio, Rudy, Miracle.
Rudy.
God, I hope
Let's
I'm
go,
right.
Rudy.
Please be right. Oh,
Points for everybody.
Oh,
Everybody's
so
I
perfect.
suddenly had fear that I was wrong, but
So-
no. It's just such an iconic phrase, that horn line.
So great, Jerry
You're right.
Goldsmith.
Yeah,
Oh, Goldsmith.
of course.
All right, so this means everybody has run the table.
Yes.
We got a bonus question that
Bonus
we're going to
round.
play here.
Only
I
listen
do
to the
have
score.
options for this one, and we'll see. I have a feeling this one may, based on. Well, we'll go ahead and play.
Scare
Question number 6.
us. Uh-oh.
Is this Creed by
The
Ludwig
band?
Göransson?
Oh, the movie.
With arms wide.
Is this Friday Night Lights, Explosions in the Sky? Or is this Moneyball, Michael Dana? We're going to make Kenny go first.
Choices again.
Choices are Creed, Friday Night Lights, and Moneyball.
I'm going to go with Friday Night Lights.
Robert.
Is that the Explosions in the Sky score? Because that's the
Maybe.
band.
I was a little
Yes.
too heavy-handed with
Yes.
this earlier, wasn't I?
Yes, that's the one.
Yes, Friday Night Lights.
Friday Night Lights, it is. And here is that the actual score in forward. These guitars. Has this been used for temp music on anything you've worked on?
That's a good question. I don't think so. It may have been used in Lone Survivor because they were a part of that score.
Oh, really?
Originally,
Yeah.
we were supposed to write together, but they asked Pete, and I fully admire this and respect this. They said, "Can we try to do this on our own?" And Pete called me and said I said, "Yeah, that's fine, whatever." And I would have loved to work with them, but at some point down the road, Pete called me and said, "Can you come in and just there's some scenes that we'd like you to do?" And I said, "Fine." And so it's just I would have liked to work with the guys, but I understand them wanting to do it by themselves.
Well, since everybody's perfect, we haven't had this yet. We're going to have to make the
I have a
questions more
bonus
difficult.
question. I have a bonus question, number 7, which is not musical. It's a 6 degrees of separation, really random bonus question for all of you. It's an entertainment question.
Yep. Should we
Can
play
you-
our outro first?
Yes.
We need to bookend the
He
game.
did.
We got to get out of that.
Can anyone here tell me the relationship between the series Friday Night Lights, not the film, the series, and the film that Steve scored, Battleship? Do you know the connective tissue?
I know one.
There's only one that I can think of, and you may know it.
Is it the actor?
Correct.
What's his name?
He's
He's a big shot now.
Rihanna.
And it's not Rihanna.
Oh, no.
Do you know the actor's name?
It's Landry from Friday Night Lights.
Correct. That's my question. It's the 6 degrees of separation. You may have to drop away from winning a prize on this. Taylor Kitsch is our
right.
winner of the day. Thank you. That's
I
our
didn't know he
bonus
was in the
question.
show.
Oh, yeah.
He was
have to admit that.
He was the star of the.
He was the star,
one of
yeah.
the stars of the series, and then I know that Battleship was both a huge get for him and also turned out to be maybe not so beneficial.
Right. You never know with these.
You never
these
know.
things.
That's one of the nice things about the entertainment business. Every day is a guess.
Yeah.
If Alex Trebek decides to retire, Robert Kraft.
I would.
If Alex
fine
Trebek
with that.
marries, that's what I thought you were going to say.
6 degrees of separation.
I think we had one more question for Steve. I know I did. I was always interested in the fact that the movies, the Transformer films, had a big rock song at the end,
Right.
either a Linkin Park song and then Imagine Dragons. Did you mentioned Explosion in the Sky, how you wanted to work with them. Did you ever have a chance to work with the bands? Would those songs just come in and be tacked on to the end of the movie?
Fortunately, I can say that I did get to work with these amazing bands. Linkin Park was the first. They came into the studio because I don't know whose idea it actually was. If it was Michael's or mine or everyone's idea to not just tack it on at the end, but to actually have elements of the song in the score throughout, so that when it plays at the end, it's not just a song at the end. It means something more.
Yeah.
And the Linkin Park guys were great. They came in, they gave me all their tracks, and we recorded some new tracks, all based around the song. And so I had this huge library of their stuff
Nice.
that I used, that I could say, oh, that piano phrase from that song could work really nicely here.
That's great.
Oh, cool.
And I would write strings around it or whatever. And the same with Imagine Dragons. Even that was another level, where I went to their studio in Vegas and we recorded a bunch of stuff. They recorded on my themes. We didn't just focus on their song. I would put up my themes and they would just riff and do these amazing things, and I'd be like, wow, this is amazing.
That is so cool.
Do you ever sit back? I mean, you have such a cool story, just giving Hans a call. Do you ever sit back and just go, this is crazy that this path happened?
Yeah, when people ask, I go, I really don't know how it all happened, how I ended up in a room with Imagine Dragons.
I was going to say, you're
recording
so
stuff and
kind of humble, not even kind of, you're so humble about the fact that you were sitting with two of the biggest rock bands on the planet,
Right.
working on music together, which is just wonderful.
And this whole period working with Hans and growing up, listening to, would you have ever thought that
No.
10 years from then, 5 years from then, you would be writing music and Hans would be saying, wow, that's pretty good.
Nope.
I guess we're going to have to write great music now for this
No.
movie.
No, not even for a second.
I think it's actually fitting that your career's actually hit a peak with doing score the podcast. I mean,
It's
I don't
all
know how
downhill now.
you're gonna ever match it. Yeah,
I
yeah.
might as well retire.
This was the moment. I would say that today would be kind of a good day to say, after this, what else is there?
You said you had a John Williams story.
Yeah, it's kind of like what you just mentioned about the Zimmer saying, wow, that's a great piece of music. I think my first exposure to film score was owning the Star Wars album, the vinyl, when I was 7, and I remember holding it and opening it, and there's Darth Vader's face, and just loving this music without really even understanding why I was. And so I think a lot of composers will tell you that same story. John Williams introduced them to this idea of, people write music for movies. It doesn't just magically appear in film. Somebody has to write that. But we share the same, I'll make it quick. We share the same agent, John and I. So I get invited to his big Hollywood Bowl concert every year.
Yeah.
And the first time I went, this was years ago, 5 years or so ago, I because we shared the same agent, they invited me backstage after the show, and Michael Gorfain, my agent, introduced me to John and said, "John, this is Steve Jablonsky." And of course, I'm trying to keep it together because he's standing right there, and he goes, "Oh yeah, Steve, I know a lot about you. I've been wanting to meet you," and it looked like he was being genuine. Whether he was lying or not, I don't care.
John Williams has an ungenuine bone in his body.
He's the most genuine, and also a humble human being considering what he's done. And I was like, well, I don't even know what I said. I can't remember what I said to that. But the fact that he knew,
that's wonderful.
Yeah, that. I mean,
and
I
then
don't
the
know what else to
ambulance
say. Just thinking about it now. The ambulance.
Well, I was going to say,
I blacked out.
You didn't hear the second part of the conversation, which is John Williams saying to Gorfain, "Why is Jablonsky getting all those gigs and I'm not?" Mike, you gotta jump in there. He's envious of you.
Oh.
All right. Well, Steve, we want to thank you again for having us in your studio and joining us on the podcast. Reminder to the listeners, this is a new podcast. We're trying to get the word out, so please tell a friend if you like what you're hearing, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Also, make sure to follow us at Score the Podcast on Twitter, and use that hashtag #NameThatScore, because we are giving away a prize this week.
Hey, for Matt Schrader, Kenny Holmes, I'm Robert Kraft. I want to thank Steve for welcoming us and sharing so much of your great story with us.
Thank you.
Score the Podcast is genuinely thrilled to have you as a guest today.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Kenny, Robert, and Matt.